So we're, I'll call the meeting to order. It's Wednesday morning. I think it's a really good day.
Mayday.
May Day, May 1st. And, yeah, so, we're gonna be talking about the miscellaneous side building and some amendments to it. And we have Michael O'Grady with us to, do a, hopefully a last run, through it. And I think you should have a copy of 877. And, Michael, I guess, we can start with you explaining, the changes that you.
Okay.
that you made.
So, you should be looking at draft number 5.1.
Yeah.
And that is what's on your website. The first change is in the lead-in language, reflecting the fact that there's going to be some additional 2 new sections, moved from 4 new sections to 6 new sections. And then you can get to page 417, section 12. This is the indirect discharge language that Secretary Moore requested that would allow going into the future for future Class A waters for the limitation on 1,000 gallon per day septic tanks to be removed. So it will apply to those waters that are currently Class A, but it will for 1,000, but it will not apply in the future to newly classified Class A waters.
And Brian, you have a handle on it.
I think so.
The-
You mind giving me a section by section
Of that section,
of all of it, the whole kit and caboodle?
I can give you a section, yeah.
Sure, thanks.
Are you the reporter?
I'll be the reporter.
Sure.
Less, I mean, fingers crossed I get COVID, but if I don't, I'll be there.
Well, we may have to give another report.
Thanks.
But you understand me.
Yeah, as I understand it, this is an opportunity, well, this would allow multiple homeowners to kind of come together and
Right, and
Build up.
it takes, think of it this way.
Yeah.
If you want to build new development, or if you want to redevelop, or if your wastewater system fails, the current language would limit you to 1,000 gallon per day septic tank,
yeah,
which is about a 5-bedroom house.
okay,
And so that's what the current law limits development to in a Class A water.
yeah,
A&R, many advocates, many representative legislators want that 1,000 gallons to go away so that there can be,
Bigger.
bigger,
it's a development in greater scope, and it wouldn't just be for residential, it would be for commercial as well.
Mhm. So then it would be how many gallons?
6,500 is the cap before you have to go get a specific individual permit. But you also need to realize that anti-degradation, which is the policy that prohibits the state from allowing any use in a water that would degrade it, also applies. So they can't allow development that would turn that Class A water into something less than it is now.
Okay.
And so that's the argument. The counter argument is this will allow for development in the Class A water. More so than it does, than the current statute does now. And some people think that development in Class A waters should be limited.
Oh, yeah, they got their spot and I don't want anybody coming in next.
That's helpful. Great. Are we gonna get big opposition from down the hall?
Well, that would be the only place and, but we passed. this
Right,
last
right.
year.
Was it last year or the year before?
Last year it came out of federal.
Well, I think I should mention that too.
Oh, yeah, right off.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you recall the bill number?
156.
S-156.
Yeah.
Okay. I think once that's mentioned, frankly,
Oh, it should be on.
yeah.
No,
You know what we're dealing with.
But no, this makes sense. That explanation makes sense.
And,
146.
Okay. And I'll start with that. I'll bring people back to 146 that we voted on last year. This is,
got lost and
got lost in the shuffle. This is what this does.
okay, now,
We're gonna say something.
Yeah, this affects mostly the Northeast Kingdom, right? We talked about that yesterday. It's mostly your territory. So if you're okay with it, I'm okay with it.
well, we aren't worried a bit about development. What
Okay.
we're worried about is these small owners having failed systems.
Yeah, okay, just so we know where it's coming from, because we will have to defend it.
With water, and
Yeah.
we wanna keep our water
Plan.
in Class A waters. We don't wanna degrade our water quality.
But so if S-146 passed, why are we need to repeat the language or S-46,
It
146?
didn't.
Go past the
pass
house? Got it,
So we're
Okay.
looking to put it on different vehicles for coverage.
good, that's great background, thank you.
Great.
So, hemp,
So the next two sections relate to hemp and or cannabis regulation. Currently, the definition of hemp is in Title VI. Because hemp is an agricultural product that is authorized by the USDA to be grown under certain conditions. One of those conditions is that it cannot be more than 0.3 THC delta 9. And what is happening at those, there are products being sold that are THC delta 8 or delta 10. And the manufacturers of those products are saying that they're not subject to cannabis regulation because they're not cannabis. They're not subject to the hemp provision because they're not delta 9. And so what this language does, it reflects the authority you gave the Cannabis Control Board to designate some of those products as cannabis products. So you will see page 5, line 15, notwithstanding subdivision A, hemp products and hemp infused products do not include any substance manufacturing intermediary or product that is prohibited or deemed a regulated cannabis product by administrative board. So the board can say some of these products are prohibited or deemed regulated as a cannabis product. And then if it contains 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis, regardless of its delta 9, then it's going to be regulated. It's not going to be a hemp product. And then on page 6, those products that are excluded from hemp products underneath subdivision B are considered a cannabis product as defined under the cannabis statutes, provided, however, that a person already licensed or registered by the board to possess cannabis products and do so in conformity with their license. So you're taking these products that the board designates by rule or which has 0.3 or more of THC, you're taking them out of the
how
gas
much is that
station.
number?
0.3,
3.
yeah,
If it's above that,
it's above that, then it's cannabis. And so you can't sell those products in the gas stations anymore. It has to be from a licensed cannabis retailer. And so it's no longer a product that's readily available. And if it's in a cannabis retailer, it's subject to all the restrictions for cannabis retail sale, age, etc. And so
it's getting that away from children and younger.
getting it out of like the mass.
And again, this was a request from the Cannabis Control Board.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And then the next one is section 14. This amends what is or is not a public building.
Right.
as you know, public buildings generally are any building other than residential, single unit residential. And public buildings need to meet certain standards such as electric code, fire code, and ADA. And it can be expensive to retrofit a building that doesn't currently meet those standards into those standards, especially when you're changing the use of that building. Because cannabis cultivation isn't agriculture, when you're using one of those buildings that used to be a farm building, used to be an agricultural building, and you're gonna use it for cannabis cultivation, technically now you have to convert it to be a public building and meet the standards for public.
Now, do we have a size of the operation to this?
No, not right now.
And I'm wondering,
Well, let me step, I was thinking you were talking about the size of the building or the size of the farm. You do have a limitation that they can't have more than 10 full-time employees that are working more than 26 weeks a year.
yeah,
So it's about who is in the building rather than the size of the building or the size of the road.
but this is for outdoor
Yes,
grow, too.
yes, it's,
an outdoor grow, but you have 1,000 square feet, is it?
I don't remember I think that's for small.
Yeah, and then in the medium, it's not, I don't know if that's even more. You have a small, medium, and then, I think part of this part of our bill is to protect or to help the small growers with a small plot be able to convert building within the farm structure to be able to dry their cannabis and work on it. As
So it's 125 plants outdoors and 1,000 square feet of plant canopy indoors. And it's 2,500 square feet of plant canopy. That's tier one, so small. Tier two is 2,500 plant canopy indoors. And 312 plants outdoors. Hold on, let's find it. And then for tier three, it's 625 plants outdoors, tier four is 1,250 outdoors. Tier five is 2,500 outdoors, tier six is 4,687.
4,000.
Someone said some serious math.
Yeah,
I don't think we have any tier sixes either.
no, I think there's only the tier ones and twos. If Pepper said something about
Yeah.
suspending or not doing those
Right.
bigger ones. But
so, right, so tier one is 1,000 square feet, tier two is 2,500, and then if you're deemed in compliance with those, if you have 125 plants for tier one, or 312 for tier two. Yeah, 4,687.
how big's the square footage for tier two?
To 2,500.
So, are there some other questions?
No, I don't think so. So, I'll just have to go back and. Here it is. I think I have any other questions. It looks like this will go to finance.
Yes,
Gives me another extra day to prep.
So in about 3 days of back up on the calendar.
Yeah. I've got a reversal scheduled for Saturday. I just go through it, work with my team.
With the chickens of the audience?
Right. I mean, without where that is. And the 6 baby geese.
Okay, can you stay a bit longer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, section by section would be great.
Right.
If you want to even shave your beard, be there that day, as me. I mean, you don't have to, you don't have to, but if you're
You
feeling
know,
like it. What's that?
You're pretty good. There are other members maybe that were.
yeah, you would,
Yeah, it'd be great.
yeah.
It'd be great.
I've got a witness. Would you like to talk to the committee a little bit about your puppy?
Yeah, and I also, oh goodness, I'm sorry. I haven't talked enough today yet. And also, my colleague Taylor has been working on it a lot here in Vermont as well. I was gonna, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, I was gonna let her kind of start and I fill in some of the stuff that we talked about.
Yeah, well, I mean, the committee can hear that and.
Yeah.
I'd like to have them hear what your concerns are, not that we have a bill, but we, if it was severe enough, we could add it, because it's miscellaneous, bill, but, so I wanted the committee to be able to hear and understand what your concerns are.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We have Michael O'Grady with us, he's our address, so he needs to spend a few minutes with us, so if we decide to do so.
Yeah,
Grab the chair, or not,
And we have, I know, Mr. Chair, we gave you some of the resources, but we brought them for everyone as a committee, just in case it's something you wanna look over. And go. Thank you so much again for letting us use.
and you.
Oh, I see, it's a packet for everybody. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
You hang on to that.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
And then there's a couple more things, Mr. Chair, that I don't think about yesterday, but I'll do that. So,
And Senator Westman, you have one for him or not?
oh yeah, of course.
I can give him mine.
I have another. Don't-
Okay, great.
Thanks. Thank you. So, thank you again for allowing us to come speak with you. I had previously testified in front of the House Agriculture with Resiliency and Forestry about this, on March 27th, so it's been some time at this point. But we are here to ask you all to remove the amendment, the Senate Bill 301, that would prohibit the sale of dogs, cats, and wolf hybrids by retail pet shops. We understand the intention of this bill, and we believe there are bad actors in the community that needs to be addressed, but we do worry that this will have the opposite effect. Pet stores are highly regulated ways that families can seek companions in Vermont. They are subject to licensing and inspection by the Department of Ag already. And they also are required to offer a warranty for these animals. So it's 7 days for illness and 1 year for congenital disease. And that would incentivize them to sell animals that are healthy. Something you could also look at is extending that warranty if you don't believe that's sufficient. And then additionally, we do believe that something called sourcing restrictions, which is in the packet that I've given you all, and other states have already implemented, have been effective, which would instead help dictate where these animals are coming from, because that's what the committee, the House Committee's concerns seem to be, is that it's not necessarily the conditions in the pet store that are the issue, it's where these animals are coming from. And I hear that, but the best way to address that would be to implement sourcing restrictions, so dictating where they are able to get these animals. I do have concerns about the testimony that was received in the committee as well. First off, they heard testimony that there were pet sale bans introduced in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and passed in New York. This session, Connecticut does not have a pet sale ban introduced at all. Massachusetts does, but it has for years and it's never moved on to committee. And there is a pet sale ban that's passed in New York, but this has sparked several lawsuits that have been facilitated by small businesses who are drastically affected by that pet sale ban. So I know there is fear that these pet stores will now move to Vermont if something like this is not implemented, but New Hampshire discussed a pet sale ban this session and decided not to move forward because they didn't think that this was the way to go about that. They did say that they'd be interested in looking at sourcing restrictions in the future, but attacking small businesses is not the way to address this issue. I also am concerned that no pet stores actually did testify before the committee. I think if we're gonna move forward with something like this, it's really important to involve all stakeholders in that discussion. If New York will be used as justification, we have members in New York that are affected by that pet sale ban who are really responsible business owners that care about the well-being of these animals, and they'd be happy to talk to you all about how that's affected them. The Vermont State Vet also testified before the committee and asked why we would eliminate the most regulated way that we are selling these animals. And the Attorney General's office testified as well and said that they have far more complaints regarding online pet scans than they do against the one pet store in Vermont who's selling cats.
Don't we have just one?
Yes.
pet store?
Yes, so there's one pet store up now that occasionally sells cats and dogs in Vermont. Again, I just believe that this, since it is one, that's not gonna help address this issue. There are bad actors and we should help these businesses find ways not to work with these individuals. I just don't think that this is gonna have a large effect. And then adding it to this bill at the end of the session just makes me think we haven't explored all the opportunities we can to address this issue.
Right.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Where is that pet store?
In South Burlington. Yes. We just believe that pet choice is really important too. I know that it is a great idea that every animal should be adopted from shelters and rescues. If someone is able to do that, we encourage that, but that's not the best fit for every single family. So we just think that in order to avoid those animals going back into shelters, people should have the ability to choose where their animals come from. A pet store is a regulated source, but again, has that warranty. They can see the full health history of these animals. So if the consumer wants to move forward with that, we think that that is the best option for them and we don't want to eliminate that avenue. And we welcome to work with you all on better ways to address this issue because again, there are bad actors and that's something we can help you all mitigate.
So the issue that's before us is, we need to get a copy of, did you give us one of 301?
No, that's not in that packet.
Take one of them.
I need copies of that.
And this amendment was added after we passed it?
Yes, so this was added last week and then just moved past Ways and Means because Ways and Means didn't think it was their purview to take out an amendment that didn't have to do with fees.
Did you help put that together, Mark?
The,
Yeah. And, did you have any more to offer? Because I wanted to hear from Mike.
I'll turn it over to Elizabeth if there's anything she has to add, but that's my spiel for you all. So, thank you so much for the opportunity today.
And I know, there are a couple of things that we spoke about yesterday, we did want to address, and thank you all again, we really appreciate it, and appreciate the time and thought that you're putting into this. I know some of the concern has been around the ability for folks to come across state lines into Vermont and do kind of like the pull off the side of the road, roadside sales, and being able to help both put an end to that because those not only are animals who don't know where they're coming from, they are also being sold in the care of people who really are under no restrictions, no guidelines, no oversight. And we agree that that's something that we actually want to see stop, and we work with Connecticut in increasing their sourcing restrictions and oversight of the sale and care of dogs and cats, both on the shelter rescue side and the pet store side. And so one of the laws that we were able to help implement was something that cuts down on and directly addresses that kind of cross state lines, pull over into a rest stop, put something up online, whether it's on Craigslist or Facebook, and say, you know, come here, we have these puppies, and you have no idea where they're coming from, you have no idea, you know, the people who are caring for them, there's really no recourse for you if you go get one and then they find out they're sick or mistreated. This bill unfortunately doesn't do anything to address that, and that's something that, similar to what we did in Connecticut, and then now last session in Pennsylvania, when rather than enacting a ban, we worked really closely with the legislature to overhaul their dog law to enact greater sourcing restrictions and greater oversight for both the stores and the shelters and rescues. Because one unfortunate disturbing trend we have seen is that in states around the country, while there have been, you know, attempts at banning retail stores or increasing, I think rightly so, the oversight of the Department of Ag on retail pet stores, there hasn't been that same move for shelters and rescues. And so we've unfortunately seen a trend where in some of these where they're private homes or where they are a network of homes for fostering, that these animals are often then being kept in hoarding-like conditions, they're being subject to treatment that isn't up to the standard that it should be. And so rather than kind of targeting just one subset of the pet industry, we recommend taking a step back, bringing all the stakeholders to the table and enacting kind of oversight and regulation that affects, again, pet, we're not saying exempt pet stores, but like pet stores and also the shelters and rescues, and including those rescues that are a network of foster homes, because we do think they do important work, but we need to make sure that, you know, care is care. We need to make sure that animals are getting the best standard of care possible. And this bill doesn't do anything to address that. Part of the testimony we've heard is that it also, you know, we're trying to cut down on the number of animals that are in shelters and making sure that we're cutting down on animals that are being returned to shelters. In California, when they enacted the ban, they did close every single pet store there. Unfortunately, California is still euthanizing the highest number of dogs in the country. And so that kind of goes to show it has nothing to do with pet stores. It's about the animals that are being brought across state lines. And we know that in places like California and places in the Northeast, especially in the New England states in general, a lot of animals are coming up from the South and the Midwest and being adopted out, which again is wonderful. We don't want that to stop. What we want is just greater oversight and greater oversight across the board, because we do think care is care at the end of the day. And we're trying to do what's best for the animals and the consumers and making sure that people, once they have an animal, they have it happy and healthy and are returning it. And so our alternative is a way working with not just us on one side of the industry, but all the stakeholders, including the state vet, the Department of Agriculture, the, you know, humane societies, the pet stores, and being able to come up with comprehensive laws similar to Pennsylvania, which again, I think they did a great job at model legislation. Connecticut and their law has been in place for years and has done a really fantastic job at kind of addressing not just the concerns of pet stores and the care and shelters, but also those hard to police areas, which is crossing over into the state, pulling up, setting up something in a backyard, at a rest stop, in a parking lot. And really, those are the folks that keep those bad actors in business. Or in Colorado, where we worked to create their PACFA laws, which govern the sourcing, and what it mandates is that any animal that's going to be coming into Colorado, whether it's for a store or for a rescue, that source that's out of state has to be able to meet the Colorado standards. And that's done an incredible job of being able to actually push those bad actors out of business, because the folks in Colorado that own the retail stores cannot work with those folks that have the USDA violations. They cannot work with the folks that maybe don't meet those Colorado standards, because they have to adhere to that. And that's something that is very heavily checked. I will say the one other thing that we want to make sure that happens is that we are creating and working with you to achieve what the bill's intent is. And the other unfortunate thing we've seen in places where these bills have passed is that the rescues, not necessarily the shelters, but the rescues will go to those bad actors, those bad breeders that we all want to be shut down. And they will purchase dogs from them under the auspices that they are rescuing them, and then bring them back to the rescues and adopt them out with very high fees. We just saw this when we were in Florida, and the rescue had done that, and they were adopting out these dogs that were purebred Cocker Spaniels that they had, I hate to be like rescued, but rescued, and then we're adopting them out for over $700, which essentially is just flipping a dog. And, you know, we agree, we don't want animals held in bad conditions, but we can't have a lot targeting one aspect of the pet care industry because they're being, painted as the bad guy when we have similar folks on the other side of it that are behaving in the same, if probably not worse manner, because they are doing it in a manner that they're not being honest to the public about how they're acting. And so we do think that there is a better way to do this. We'd be happy to work with the legislature on it, because I think that Vermont has the potential to be a way to kind of set a model and create some model legislation for how to really address this, just given the makeup of the assembly, given the care, and I think just given the willingness to work with all folks and all stakeholders. And so that would be our recommendation, and what we want is to be able to, rather than kind of throwing something in at the last minute that doesn't address what we've heard are a lot of the very real concerns, finding a way that we can work together next session to create a more comprehensive piece of legislation that everyone can get behind, that we can bring all the stakeholders, including the state Department of Ag and the state vet and the small business owner that's in Vermont, as well as the rescue models and the shelters, to the table and come up with something that hopefully then people like us can go to other states and say, hey, here's what Vermont did, here's how it works, here's what we would say you should do, and here's how they're actually taking comprehensive action to do what's right.
Well, then questions from Irene?
Thanks. I heard it said that Connecticut doesn't have a ban, but they do have a law. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, absolutely. So they don't have a ban, they instead created sourcing restrictions laws. It sounds so simple. But what they have created is greater oversight in terms of inspections that the state agriculture department does on the stores, but not just on the stores, on the records and documentation of every animal that's coming into the state. It mandates what those records have to be from those stores, as well as then what the breeders have to supply on the front end. It also mandates state veterinary checks before the animals can be released to the public, before the animals can really be brought and sold within the state. And they've also increased oversight on the shelters and rescues in terms of the standards that they have to meet according to the Department of Ag on their facilities, also on what the records are that the animals coming in from out of state have. Understanding even on that end, sometimes you don't know if an animal has been, astray. If you're me, just go and are living in Mississippi and pick up a stray cat and bring it home like I did. I had no idea what the background was, but they even they've even written something in for there to be able to say, you may not know exactly where it's from, but you can then say, there's classifications that can be given and then steps that can be taken so that you can still be sure that the animal has medical documentation, making sure that there is a way for the consumer, whether it's at a pet store, whether it's at a shelter or a rescue, to be able to trace back where the animal came from. They've increased the warranties on the pet store side, so that way if someone goes and purchases a cat or a dog and they get sick, whether that's congenital, whether that's, they get pneumonia, there is recourse, so then that consumer isn't left on the hook for hundreds or thousands of dollars of veterinary fees. And I'm happy to even send that legislation over. Connecticut has been one of those where we have kind of held it up as a great alternative. because they did go through it very intentionally on what the concerns are. And then how you can really address that. Is it absolutely perfect? Of course not, because as business evolves on all ends, whether it's the nonprofit side or the for-profit, things change, and so we have to continually be able to like rework and update that law. And that's where in Pennsylvania's dog law, we are able to actually take some of what we learned in Connecticut, how the business has evolved and apply some of that to the new law in Pennsylvania and make some really important updates, which I think including quarantining, making sure that any dog that comes across state lines has a set time that they are quarantined, so they don't release or potentially cause any zoonotic diseases, since Pennsylvania is such an agriculture heavy state, being very concerned on that end as well. And then again, including making sure that what is available to consumers is a complete care card for the animals. Again, in Connecticut, do both where they come from, and then when they're in the store, every vet visit, every shot they're given, complete healthcare records, and then also what they receive when they're in the care of their breeders. And I'm happy to send you in both of those. I just worked on Pennsylvania's last year. We were really, and that was again as an alternative to a ban. It was, they had proposed one. We sat down with their House Ag and Senate Ag committees to work on something much more comprehensive. And that was something the Humane Society agreed to because it was a way to address those concerns.
You all set, like,
No, but I'll let
right.
Senator Conway take over.
Thank you. So I'm trying to understand the whole issue here.
Yeah.
I don't foresee any way we could ever pass a law that would prevent someone from entering the state through either 91 or 89 or 2 interstate and pulling over and selling animals. There's just, I don't know how you would ever enforce that or get your arms around that. So that's probably always gonna happen, kind of thing.
But we already have that law, it should be on the books, I think we stopped that, I thought, like 8 years ago. I'm not mistaken, look at that.
I don't know, but again, I don't know how, it's one thing to have law enforcement, another to actually have it work with enforcement. But my question, I guess, is more, because it's late in the session, what, and you may not be able to, maybe Taylor doesn't know either.
Mhm.
What caused the House committee to want to get this in this year? Was there an event that happened, or was it something they wanted to do all along and they just forgot about it, or?
There wasn't a single event that there wasn't an event or some news event that happened. Taylor was involved in the process from the beginning, but I can't say there wasn't something where we saw a media storm or an event that happens in Vermont or in I would say the New England area kind of caused folks here to say, we've had this and it's sitting, we need to really act on it, but you can speak more to the process.
I would just say, I think they did receive a lot of powerful emotional testimony about bad actors out there because they exist. And I think this is it looks like a really simple solution, but when you actually look at what it's going to do, it's minimal. Again, there is one pet store doing that in Vermont, and I understand the fear of other stores coming here and selling cats and dogs as pet stores, but if you have regulations in place, that's okay. You're enhancing responsible businesses in Vermont. So I think that it's just important that we all have the same goal. We just need to take a step back and do it right. And do it in a way that will be
Brought
effective.
it to the committee, the agency.
No, the sponsor was
Maybe.
Representative as now. I want to make sure I'm saying that okay. Yeah.
But, see, the only thing we could do is ask for committee conference or move to amend the bill. Or we could move to amend the bill by striking section blah, 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 and accepting the rest of the bill, deleting and send it back, or we could, ask for a committee or conference and
Just to deal with this one section,
um,
or maybe have they,
that's why I wanted Michael
Yeah.
around to tell us what the heck transpired over there on the legal side of things, so that we would know where we are. Because, yeah, we're hearing from two witnesses that would like to have that withdrawn, deleted from the bill. We gotta get somebody from the house down here too to say, wow, boy, this is why we did this. It was life or death for a million puppies or whatever. And get them down here and see what they were.
If I'm remembering correctly, we voted out as 301 with no amendments, just favorably, so there, at the moment, there's no path for a committee of conference because we don't have any disagreement between the two bodies.
We do with what they had.
Well, with this particular one, but right now,
Oh, the rest of it.
with this, I don't think we changed what came over from 301, did we?
Sorry, Phil.
Oh, well, 301.
Oh, that was our bill, okay.
301 went from
Yeah, I got
here
it.
all
So
the
they've
way,
added.
and
I don't know if
they,
they've added anything besides this.
so that's why I wanted to hear from Mike.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if you don't mind, thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned the ag agency inspects, is that like an annual inspection? How often are they swinging by the pet store that does this to check them out? Cause a lot could happen in between those annual inspections or whatever they are.
Yeah, I can answer that. At this point, it's just once, but then again, that's an adjustment that could
Once a
be-
year?
Yeah. Once they,
And what's-
when they're registering at pet stores. So something in other states we've done is increase the number of inspections.
So they get one inspection when they start
Mhm.
selling dogs and
Yeah.
then never again get inspected? Okay, so that's problematic, I think.
Yeah.
Because
And
it
it's-
could go
but
down how
it's-
fast and we never know, right?
Oh, yes, and that's similar though for also the brick and mortar shelters and I don't want to say count, but like the brick and mortar shelters and municipal run shelters, if there aren't, I would say there aren't enough inspections across the board, whether it's for pet stores or whether it's for the nonprofit side, and that is something, you know, in Connecticut and Pennsylvania, they have surprise inspections on across the board for everyone where they, you know, they say like, if we show up, you have to be able to provide this information. And then in Colorado, they have the results of every inspection available online, publicly available. And in Connecticut, they do as well, and that's something that I would recommend doing, because I do think that having that information publicly available creates better accountability. And that's, I don't want to say like that's an easier thing to do, but that's usually been something that's been pretty palatable on all sides. Not, you're not hearing objections on something like that from us or our small business owners, because they feel like, we're running things the right way. We're fine if the Department of Ag wants to come by and just drop by unannounced or do multiple inspections. We're happy to provide them the information they need.
Now, I heard it said that pet stores did testify. Was the one pet store even invited? Do we know? Did they decline? Did
They were not invited.
Not invited, okay. And what happens to a pet that's returned? Like you said, there's a period of time in which if they're sick or whatever, they can be returned to the pet store. What do they do? Do you know?
It depends on what the reason why, like if they are, let's say if they have a congenital disease. Usually in the pet stores that we've worked with that have warranties, they'll take care of that animal, whether, whatever like the medical condition is. In some places, they have the way the warranties are written at the state is they can, I don't feel like exchange, but they can offer up and say like, you really wanted a dachshund and, unfortunately, this one has a congenital disease that you can't care for, we can care for them. But is there, do you want to get to know some of the other animals that are here and potentially still, if you still want that kind of same animal, or if you still want another dog, we're happy to work with you and help you find the right animal that works with you. I hate being like in exchange, but it's a way to say like, you wanted an animal, let's find something that works. We'll take care of this. Or if you want to keep caring for them, we will pay like your vet costs get covered.
Thank you.
But then what happens to the sick dog that's returned?
It depends in the same way it would depend on what happens to sick animals in the shelters when, the shelters or the rescues make the decision on whether or not it's feasible to continue caring for the animal, both for the animal's quality of life and for the ability for that shelter rescue or that pet store to be able to maintain care for that animal while maintaining the high standard of care for the others. And so it's in the same way, we don't like to think of, you know, when I volunteered at the Arizona Humane Society, we didn't like to think about the fact that unfortunately sick animals would be euthanized. They would be, you know, humanely euthanized if it was something there cost prohibitive or the ability to give the animal a quality of life that isn't up to the standard you should be receiving.
I also just want to add, I'm looking at the law now, it's inspection upon annual renewal when they're renewing that license and if there's a complaint. So they will inspect if the Department of Ag receives a complaint about the pet store.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob. So Senator Renner asked whether any of the testimony was taken from the pet store. What about the Humane Societies?
Yes.
Yes, I will say, and Taylor can speak more to this, I will say, unfortunately, the pet store was not invited and there were unfortunate times when Taylor was not given the opportunity to provide testimony, but several members of the Humane Society or the kind of the folks that were pushing the bill were given the opportunity to testify. There was one instance in which only Taylor from our side issue was given the opportunity to testify. The AKC wasn't, but then they, I think, took 3 or 4 folks from the other side on the position and allowed them to testify testimony.
AKC, me, and the Vermont Federation of Dogs testified in opposition.
Were they in support of the bill?
No, they were in opposition.
Uh,
Yeah. And then the Humane Society testified in support along with some grievances.
Well, I'm doing more. That's-
Yeah, and again, we really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. We also appreciate your thoughtful questions. I think that hopefully we can get to a really good solution this.
Sure of luck, I should say, we draw out of the hat who we'll let in and not let in, and like all of you want.
That's the first time I've ever. Actually, I'm not the first that wins prizes. Except that one
Well,
time.
this is a prize, let me tell you.
I mean, it's right up there with the one time I won a quilt in elementary.
There you
school.
go.
We try to hear from everybody that calls us, writes us,
Yeah,
And then-
again, we really appreciate it, and I do appreciate your questions. I will send you that information. I did make sure to note it, so I could get that information to you, and I'll also send to you. I'll do that this afternoon.
yeah, see that. Yeah, thank
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you so much.
you. So, is that toward the end of the bill?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Page 22. And so, did you get this fit in on any of this? Or-
I did not sit in on much of this. I don't know if I needed to. I've been working on these issues since I started
Well,
here.
I was gonna say,
One of the first subject matters that I was assigned because people didn't want it, and so.
ended up in
And so I've been doing it off and on for 20+ years.
yes.
So there's a lot of things that have just been raised, a lot of issues. I think one of the major issues is that there's no centralized entity that regulates animal welfare in the state. So there was testimony that the pet shops should, or the rescues and shelters should be held to the same standards as pet shops or similar standards. There was a bill, 826, that would have done that. It was introduced just this year. It would have required shelters and rescue organizations to be licensed and to meet specified standards. Similarly, that bill would have also required persons transporting animals into the state to be licensed and to meet standards. So the sourcing provision that the previous witness referenced would have been partly addressed. And it would have created a division of animal welfare at the Department of Public Safety to be the entity that would oversee those programs, those licenses, the standards, implementation, inspection, and enforcement. Unfortunately, the bill, it was a long bill. It was about 67 pages long, and the committee, one of the things that the committee learned is that really no agency in the state wants to be the entity to take on the responsibility for animal welfare enforcement and administration. They all recognize that it's a significant, sincere problem. I believe that they were all sincere in their testimony, but they all did not want it. So the House Government Operations Committee basically came up with a first step, that they did create a division of animal welfare, that it's at the Department of Public Safety, and it's a one-person division. And that director of animal welfare would be required to come up with a comprehensive plan for the administration, enforcement, and coordination of animal welfare laws in the state. And that plan is due 8 months after they hire that person, because their person needs qualifications. There's been difficulty hiring people, so they didn't want to put in a specified date, not knowing when that director would be hired. So 8 months after that person is hired, then the plan comes out.
So that bill didn't pass, right?
Pardon me?
Where is that language?
That bill did not meet crossover, but went to rules in the House, came out of, actually passed out of the House, but did not meet crossover, went to rules in the Senate. Senate rules passed it out. It's in House Senate Gov Ops right now, and it is scheduled to be voted out of Gov Ops tomorrow.
But the appropriation contained in it is not in the budget.
It is a self-funded bill. It increases the surcharge, the rabies surcharge on licensing from
By
$1 to
$2
$3.
Yeah.
And then uses that money and puts that money in a special fund to pay for the administration program.
Okay.
Arguably, the position would need to be created, but there's my understanding position at the department already that could be used.
And that's gonna be in the Department of Public Safety.
Department of Public Safety, yeah.
And so section 20 in our bill,
In 301, right?
pardon,
In 301.
yeah, why is that there? Why wasn't all this put into that food stuff?
Well, it honestly, well, nothing that's in 626 about the standards about licensing is in 626 anymore. It was all removed. It was all removed because it was pretty detailed. It was pretty detailed about what would need to be met, how it would need to be met, who would need to meet it. Effectively, they were using the Association of Shelter Veterinarians guidelines as the default standards, and they don't always apply to every type of animal. They might not apply to birds. They might not apply to reptiles, and so they had to come up with different ways to address those types of animals, and they didn't have time to hear from all the interested parties on what those standards should be. So they just took all those standards out.
Well, it sounds to me like, you know, the vehicle's traveling too fast to, you know, check the air in the tires, or
Well,
see if there's any motor under the hood and they're just rushing something through.
I want to go back to the fact that no one wants to assume the responsibility voluntarily for this. The Agency of Agriculture hates the responsibilities that they have for the regulation of pet shops and the regulation of sales of dogs and cats. They don't believe that that is their core mission. Their core mission is agriculture. They do not believe that this is agriculture.
Well, it is pets and, but
And they have had issues with enforcement of these laws over time. Thankfully, the biggest issue was what was called the backyard breeder exemption, which took like 6 years to get rid of. But it was ultimately removed. Now, if you're a pet dealer, so if you sell 3 or more litters in a 12-month period, you are regulated, but otherwise you are not regulated. So there is a subset of sales in the state that are not regulated in any way. And then it's difficult to even enforce the pet dealer requirement, because how do you determine whether or not a person has sold 3 or 4 litters in any given year? So there are issues
oh.
in the state about the sale of dogs and cats. The previous witness raised some of those. 626 was going to address many of those issues, but it currently does not. But it does create an entity that would ultimately be responsible for those standards and enforcement of those standards.
That's in 626.
That's in 626.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't fully figured out why the Ag Committee put section 20 in this bill.
Well, it is an agency of agricultural regulated program right now. They do regulate licensing of pet shops and the sale of dogs and cats. So it is technically their authority. As I said, they would prefer not to be their authority. But it is currently right now. So it is a Title 20 provision that's in their jurisdiction.
But what about 626? It's,
626 is already out of the house.
yeah, so it's on its way to passage, let's say. I thought public safety was going to be looking at the pet stuff.
Well, not until the public safety, the director of animal welfare comes up with that plan, which is likely over a year away. And so you won't have a plan and any proposed standards or proposed transfer of jurisdiction from the Agency of Agriculture to public safety,
See,
probably 2 years.
the part that bothers me, Michael talked about getting blessed with this. Well, I've been on this side of that for the 20 to 25 years that this turmoil has been going on. And about every 4 years or to 5, it boils to the top again. And we do what we think is right and just and so, some laws to deal with it. And also on 4 more years, right back to the top of it. And
The General Assembly has done some really good work on these issues, like defining what's adequate shelter, adequate water, adequate food. That was a big deal, like about 4 years ago.
I remember.
And before that, it was getting rid of the backyard dealer provision, which was 4 years before that. I mean, it has done good work, but it has been incremental.
But it has taken, in every case that I've worked on, taken the whole session to get it dealt with. From start to end, and I don't see how we in with what 4 and 7 days left in the building supposedly. You know, the last 2 or 3, you don't amount to thing doing bills. That we're gonna do justice to fixing this. I mean, we can deal with this amendment in section 20. And it, you know, it changes our bill as we send it to the so as I said earlier, we can either move to amend the bill by striking out blah section 20 and ship it back, or we can ask for a committee of conference because of the changes they make in the bill. But to really do the right work that needs to be done to protect our animals, and which we should do, or the legislature should do. You don't do that in 2 or 3 days. You end up like the house is ending up making a mess out of things, and in dreaming that you really done something important, and you haven't really done anything but. So
this is already passed out, they've sent it back to us.
Yeah,
No, they haven't, okay, so this is where it's at.
just left Ways and Means yesterday. I don't know if it could be referred to approach today.
Oh, so it's got a little bit of a trip.
So it hasn't come, I thought it was in the government operations.
Oh,
No.
626 is.
66 is the government numbers. 301 just left Ways and Means yesterday. It's on the notice calendar today. I don't know if the clerk is going to send it to appropriations or.
626.
Or
626.
that's the animal welfare bill.
Oh,
creating
thank God.
laws.
Then Ruth's.
Yeah,
It's in there now.
so
Do you want to get into specific things or do you want to just put on the shelf for now?
this,
Yeah.
well, I wanted to make sure that we're ready in case it does come back. If the committee feels how you feel about section 20, and if you'd like to, if the committee would like to have further discussion, whether we move to amend it and ask to have that, you know, offer an amendment to
Okay.
strike 20
Yeah.
and send it back, or to ask for a committee of conference, because that'll be up to us, and go from there on 301.
Do you mind, Mr. Chair, if we just have 10 minutes of what the, why they wanted it?
Why the.
Yeah, why the house wants it? I mean, just
Oh, yeah,
curious.
we got,
I know we're short on time, that's the thing.
no, we got, you know, this morning, a few minutes, so that, no, we need to hear,
Just curious about what they have heard.
yeah,
maybe
because
you,
we
that's all.
heard the
So you
side
guys, yeah.
that would like to have it gone.
Yeah,
And, yeah, we got to hear the other side and who they had in for witnesses
Yeah.
to support
just to see if we're
this and
Yeah, thanks,
the whole 9 yards, and,
thanks.
so I guess, are there any other questions for Michael?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the pet stores if we're gonna go down that route, because apparently the pet stores weren't heard from.
There's only one.
The pet store, we haven't heard from the pet store. If the house did not hear testimony from them, I think we should. If we're gonna go down this path, we may not, but I think we need to fill in those holes.
Yeah, the only thing that I feel is that it's awful late to be hopping on the caboose of this train and hanging on, because you know, you can you can mess stuff up
Yeah.
just as much at the tail end of this session as you can. Make it better for the people of this state.
Mhm.
So, it's very important that we hear what's the big killer issue here that we're trying to solve. So, yep. Anything else for,
No, thank you.
anything else from you, Michael, for us?
No,
You don't need to wish this well already. We're up to our fourth year, so,
yeah,
we're very good. Yeah, but it is strange how, these things go along good for a while and then gets bottom side up. And, but we need to protect our.
so on another note, 8706, the neonic bill, the House committee voted to go to conference committees. Yesterday,
They said,
yeah.
they didn't like that bill.
There's some differences between the two bodies and they think that they'd like to work them out at their conference. They're concerned there's not enough time to do a further proposal.
Well, I figured they'd jump on this. We've done such a good job with it. Nobody got it. But that. That'll probably come back.
Probably it's on notice today, but they could probably follow up on notice after the conference.
Yeah. Anything else? Well, thank you. for
Thank
your
you.
comment.
Thanks, Michael.
Right, maybe one.
That would be lovely.
Yeah.
So we'll,
Back at 11.
we take a nap. I'm talking about a break.
Do we want to hear from the House rep who introduced the bill? At some point?
Well, I was gonna ask what they were doing.
Okay.
Maybe they want.
Before we go back on?
Maybe they wanna testify.